Day 1. At first, nobody thought it was an invasion. It began with lights. Thousands of them. They appeared silently across the night sky, brighter than stars and moving far too slowly to be meteors. Social media exploded with videos within minutes. People stepped outside their homes, pointing phones toward the sky, laughing, speculating, making jokes about aliens finally visiting Earth. I was one of them. I stood in the middle of the street outside my apartment building, watching the strange glowing dots drift above the clouds. They were perfectly still, too still. Then one of them moved. Not like a plane, not like a satellite. It changed direction instantly, sliding across the sky like a piece of light being dragged by an invisible hand. Someone down the street shouted, "Did you see that?" Phones kept recording. The internet went crazy. But then something strange happened. The lights started getting bigger. At first it looked like they were just getting brighter, but within minutes people realized the truth. They weren't getting brighter. They were getting closer. Much closer. Sirens began to echo across the city as emergency alerts appeared on every phone. Unknown aerial objects detected. Please remain indoors. But no one listened. Everyone stayed outside. Everyone watched. Then the clouds began to glow. A deep blue light pushed through them like lightning trapped inside a storm. And suddenly the first ship appeared. It was enormous. A dark metallic shape slowly descended through the clouds, blocking the stars behind it. It looked like a massive floating city, covered in glowing lines of blue light that pulsed across its surface. Cars stopped in the streets. People stopped breathing. The ship didn't make a sound. It just hovered there, silently. More ships followed. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Across the horizon the sky filled with enormous black shapes, each one slowly descending toward the earth. Someone whispered behind me, "Oh my God!" Military jets screamed overhead a few minutes later, racing toward the ships. For a brief moment, people cheered. The military would handle it. They always did. The jets fired the first missiles. Bright streaks of fire shot upward toward the alien ship above our city. The explosions lit up the sky like fireworks. But when the smoke cleared, the ship was still there. Not even scratched. Then the ship moved. A single blue beam shot downward from its center. It hit the ground 5 blocks away. And the entire street disappeared. Buildings, cars, everything, gone in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave knocked me to the pavement. People started screaming. That's when we realized the truth. This wasn't first contact. This was war. More beams fired across the city. Explosions tore through skyscrapers. Military jets tried to escape, but smaller alien craft launched from the giant ship and chased them down like predators. One by one the jets exploded in the sky. Within minutes the city was burning. Phones stopped working. The internet disappeared. Power went out. Panic spread through the streets as millions of people ran in every direction, trying to escape something none of us understood. I ran too. Because above us, the alien ship slowly moved deeper into the city. And more were coming. That was the moment the world ended. And the first day of the alien invasion began. Day 3. The world had already changed. When the invasion started, people thought the military would push the aliens back within hours. That's what governments said on the emergency broadcasts during the first day. Every channel repeated the same message. Remain calm. The situation is under control. But by the third day, those broadcasts had stopped. The sky above the city was no longer dark. It glowed. Massive alien ships hovered above the clouds like silent predators, their blue lights shining down over the ruins below. Entire sections of the city had been destroyed by the strange beams the ships fired from above. Some streets were nothing but craters and burning metal. I had spent the last 2 days hiding, running, watching everything fall apart. The highways were completely blocked with abandoned cars. People had tried to escape the city when the invasion began, but the alien ships destroyed the roads leading out. Bridges collapsed. Tunnels filled with wreckage. No one was leaving. By the time night came on day 3, the city was already a graveyard. Fires burned everywhere. The power grid was gone, so the only light came from burning buildings and the strange blue glow from the alien ships above. That night I found shelter inside an abandoned grocery store. The windows were shattered, and the shelves had been mostly emptied by looters, but I managed to find a backpack and a few cans of food hidden behind the counter. I grabbed bottled water, a flashlight, and a small camping knife someone had left behind. It wasn't much, but it was enough to survive another day. Outside, the city was too quiet. No traffic, no voices, just the distant sound of fires crackling and the low humming noise coming from the alien ships in the sky. At first I thought it was some kind of engine. But the sound didn't change. It was constant, like a giant machine slowly breathing above the planet. Around midnight I heard something else. Footsteps. Soft, slow, moving down the street outside. I turned off my flashlight immediately and crouched behind the checkout counter, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then a strange clicking sound echoed through the street. It didn't sound human. Carefully, I crawled toward the broken window and peeked outside. At first I didn't see anything. The street was covered in debris and abandoned cars. But then something moved. It stepped into the orange glow of a nearby fire. The creature was tall. Too tall. At least 3 meters high, with long thin limbs and a body covered in dark metallic armor that seemed almost grown rather than built. Its head was narrow and elongated, with several glowing blue eyes arranged in a vertical line. It carried something that looked like a weapon, pulsing with the same blue light as the alien ships. The creature slowly scanned the street. Hunting. My heart started pounding so loudly I was sure it could hear it. Another one stepped into view. Then a third. They moved carefully between the abandoned cars, studying the buildings like predators searching for prey. One of them stopped directly in front of the grocery store. The glowing eyes slowly turned toward the broken window. Toward me. I froze. For a moment the creature didn't move. Then it raised its weapon. A thin blue beam shot through the window, slicing across the store shelves like a blade made of light. Glass exploded everywhere. I dropped to the floor as the beam cut across the room just inches above me. The aliens had found me. And day 3 of the invasion was about to become my first real fight to survive. Day 4. The beam cut through the grocery store like a knife through paper. Shelves exploded into splinters above my head, cans and broken glass crashing to the floor. I didn't think. I didn't plan. My body just reacted. I ran. The back door of the store burst open as I slammed through it and stumbled into a narrow alley behind the building. The night air was thick with smoke from the fires burning across the city. Behind me, I heard the aliens enter the store. Heavy metallic footsteps. Slow. Controlled. They weren't rushing. They knew I had nowhere to go. I sprinted down the alley, my backpack bouncing against my shoulders. The flashlight inside clanked with every step, but I didn't dare turn it on. The only light came from the burning buildings and the eerie blue glow from the alien ships floating above the clouds. I reached the end of the alley and slid behind an overturned delivery truck. For a second I forced myself to breathe. Think. Running blindly through the streets would get me killed. The aliens were everywhere now. Their ships hovered above the city, and their ground patrols moved through neighborhoods like hunters. They were clearing the city. Street by street. I peeked around the truck. The road ahead looked abandoned. Burned-out cars lined both sides, their windows shattered, alarms long since dead. Smoke drifted across the pavement like fog. Then I heard the footsteps again. Closer. They had followed me out of the store. The alley behind the truck glowed faintly blue as one of the alien soldiers stepped into view. The creature's tall body unfolded slowly as it looked down the alley, its glowing eyes scanning the darkness. Another one appeared behind it. Then another. 3 of them. The first alien tilted its head slightly, like it was listening. Then its eyes turned directly toward the truck. Toward me. My stomach dropped. Before I could move, the creature raised its weapon again. A flash of blue light exploded across the street. The beam slammed into the truck, slicing the metal frame apart like it was made of cardboard. The explosion of sparks and twisted metal threw me backward across the pavement. Pain shot through my shoulder as I hit the ground. The aliens stepped into the street. They didn't run. They didn't need to. They knew they were faster, stronger, smarter. One of them raised its weapon again. I grabbed the first thing my hand touched, a broken brick from the sidewalk, and threw it as hard as I could toward a nearby car. The brick smashed the window. The car alarm suddenly screamed to life. The aliens turned instantly toward the sound. That was my chance. I rolled to my feet and ran. Across the street. Between the abandoned cars. Through the smoke. Behind me, blue beams flashed again as the aliens fired toward the alarm. The car exploded in a shower of sparks and metal, but by the time they realized the trick, I was already gone. I sprinted through several side streets until my lungs felt like they were on fire. Finally, I ducked into an underground parking garage beneath an office building and collapsed behind a concrete pillar. For several minutes I just sat there in the darkness, trying to control my breathing. Above me, the distant hum of alien ships echoed through the night. The world outside was gone. Cities were burning. Governments had vanished. The aliens now controlled the skies, the streets, everything. And it had only been 4 days. I looked down at the small knife I had taken from the grocery store. That was all I had left to defend myself. If I wanted to survive the next 361 days, I was going to need more than luck. Day 7. I stayed in the underground parking garage for 3 days. Not because it was safe, but because it was the only place left where the alien patrols didn't seem to look. The city above had turned into something unrecognizable. From the entrance of the garage, I could see the skyline through a gap between buildings. Several skyscrapers were still burning, thick black smoke rising into the sky like pillars. And above it all, the ships, massive alien carriers hovered silently in the clouds, their blue lights pulsing slowly across their metallic surfaces. Sometimes smaller crafts would detach from the underside and descend toward the city like hunting birds. Every time they did, explosions followed. The aliens were still destroying parts of the city. But not everything. That was the strange part. Some areas they simply occupied. Others they completely erased. It felt like they were studying us. Or harvesting something. By day 7, the food I had taken from the grocery store was almost gone. I counted what was left carefully. 3 cans of beans, 1 bottle of water, and a handful of crackers. Maybe 2 days of food. 3 if I stretched it. I knew I had to leave the garage. But leaving meant risking the streets again. And the streets belonged to the aliens now. That afternoon I heard something unexpected. Voices. Human voices. At first I thought I was imagining it. But then I heard it again. Whispers echoing somewhere deeper in the underground structure. I slowly stood up, gripping the small knife in my hand. Every survival instinct told me to stay hidden. Humans were just as dangerous as aliens now. Looters, desperate survivors, people who had already given up on rules and morality. But if there were other survivors down here, they might have food, or weapons. Carefully, I moved deeper into the garage. The lower levels were almost completely dark, the air thick and damp. My footsteps echoed softly across the concrete as I followed the sound of voices down a ramp leading to the lowest level. Then I saw the light. A faint orange glow flickered behind a row of parked cars. Firelight. I crept closer. Peeking between the vehicles, I finally saw them. 5 people sat around a small fire built inside a metal barrel. 2 men, 2 women, and a teenage boy. They looked just as exhausted as I felt. Dirty clothes, tired eyes. But one thing immediately caught my attention. Weapons. One of the men held a shotgun across his knees. Another had a pistol tucked into his belt. These people had survived the first week. And they had done it armed. Before I could decide what to do, one of the women suddenly looked up. Her eyes locked directly onto me. For a moment neither of us moved. Then the man with the shotgun turned and pointed it straight at my chest. "Don't move," he said calmly. I froze. My knife suddenly felt very small. The group stared at me carefully, judging whether I was a threat or just another survivor. Finally the teenage boy spoke. "Wait, he's alone." The woman studied me for another second before nodding slowly. The man with the shotgun lowered the weapon slightly, but didn't take his finger off the trigger. "You hiding down here too?" he asked. I nodded. "Since day 4. The group exchanged glances. Then the woman moved slightly to the side and pointed to an empty spot near the fire. "Sit," she said. I stepped closer carefully and lowered myself onto the concrete. For the first time since the invasion began, I wasn't alone anymore. But as I looked around the group, one thought kept echoing in my mind. If these 5 people had survived 7 days, maybe together we could survive longer. Maybe even a year. If the aliens didn't find us first. Alien fire. Day 10. For the first time since the invasion began, I slept without expecting to die. Not because the world had become safer, but because I wasn't alone anymore. The group in the underground garage had been surviving together since day 2 of the invasion. They had found the lower level of the parking structure when the first alien ships appeared and had stayed hidden there ever since. Their leader was the man with the shotgun. His name was Marcus. He was tall, maybe in his mid-40s, with a thick beard and tired eyes that never stopped scanning the darkness around us. Before the invasion he had worked as a security guard, which probably explained why he was the only one who seemed calm even now. The woman who first spotted me was Elena. She had short dark hair and a sharp voice that made it clear she didn't trust strangers easily. She handled most of the supplies and kept track of the food. Then there was Tom, the quiet man with the pistol. He used to be a mechanic before everything collapsed, which meant he was the only one who knew how to fix things. The teenage boy was named Lucas. He couldn't have been older than 16. Somehow he had survived the first 2 days alone before finding the others. And finally there was Sarah, a nurse who had been working at a hospital when the alien ships appeared. 6 survivors now, 6 people hiding beneath a dead city. But even underground we couldn't ignore what was happening above us. Every few hours the entire garage trembled as distant explosions shook the streets. The aliens were still active, still patrolling, still destroying anything they considered a threat. And sometimes, we heard something worse. Human screams. Marcus had explained it on my second night with the group. Alien patrols come through certain streets every day, he said quietly. If they find people, they don't always kill them. What do? Lucas asked. Marcus looked toward the ceiling, where the distant humming of alien ships echoed faintly. They take them. No one spoke after that. By day 10, food had become our biggest problem. The small stash Elena had collected from nearby stores was almost gone. We had maybe 4 days left if we rationed carefully. Which meant one thing. We had to go back to the surface. Marcus gathered us around the fire barrel that evening and explained the plan. There's a supermarket about 4 blocks north, he said, pointing to a rough map Tom had drawn in the dust on the concrete floor. We tried reaching it on day 3 but alien patrols were everywhere. He looked at me. You said you survived out there for a few days. How many patrols did you see? 3, I said. But they move slowly, like they're searching for something. Sarah frowned. Or someone. Marcus nodded. Either way, we move fast. 2 people go up, grab whatever they can carry, and come back down before patrols reach the area. Lucas immediately leaned forward. I can go. Marcus shook his head. No. Lucas opened his mouth to argue, but Marcus stopped him with a look. You're staying here. Then Marcus turned toward me. You and me will go. For a moment my stomach tightened. Leaving the safety of the garage meant facing the aliens again. But if we didn't bring food back, none of us would last the week. Marcus loaded fresh shells into his shotgun and handed me a small flashlight. We leave at dawn, he said. Above us, somewhere beyond the concrete ceiling, alien ships drifted across the sky like silent gods watching over a dying world. Day 10 of the invasion was about to begin. And we were finally going back outside. Day 11. Dawn didn't look the same anymore. Before the invasion, the sunrise filled the sky with warm colors, orange, pink, gold spreading slowly across the clouds. But now the sky above the city was dark and gray, permanently covered by thick smoke drifting from burning buildings. And above the smoke, the alien ships. They were always there. Marcus and I waited at the entrance of the parking garage until the faintest light appeared through the ruined streets. The city was eerily quiet except for the distant crackling of fires and the constant low hum of the alien carriers floating high above the clouds. Marcus checked the street carefully. Clear, he whispered. We stepped outside. The cold morning air hit my face as we moved between the abandoned cars lining the road. Some vehicles were burned to black metal skeletons. Others looked like people had simply stopped driving and run away. The city had frozen in the moment the invasion began. Marcus moved slowly, the shotgun resting against his shoulder as his eyes scanned every building and alley. Supermarkets 4 blocks, he murmured. Stay close. We walked quickly but carefully, staying near the sides of buildings where shadows were deeper. Every sound felt too loud, every step, every piece of broken glass crunching under our shoes. The further we moved from the garage, the worse the destruction became. One entire apartment complex had collapsed into the street, crushed by what looked like a direct hit from one of the alien beams. The pavement was cracked and warped, and several cars were buried under tons of concrete. We climbed over the rubble carefully. Halfway across the ruined street Marcus suddenly froze. He raised his hand slowly. Stop. I held my breath. Then I heard it. That strange metallic clicking sound again. Alien patrol. Marcus slowly crouched behind a burned-out taxi and motioned for me to do the same. The sound grew louder. A moment later one of the alien soldiers stepped into the street ahead of us. It was even more terrifying in daylight. The creature stood nearly 3 meters tall, its dark armored body reflecting the faint gray sunlight. Several glowing blue eyes ran vertically down its narrow head, scanning the empty city with cold precision. Another alien followed, then another, 3 again, just like the night they found me. The patrol moved slowly down the street, examining buildings and vehicles as if searching for signs of life. One of them stopped beside a wrecked bus. Its eyes glowed brighter. For a terrifying second, I thought it had seen us. But then the creature simply continued walking. The patrol disappeared around the corner. Marcus finally exhaled. See what I mean? He whispered. They're hunting. We waited another 2 minutes before moving again. The supermarket finally came into view at the end of the next block. Or what was left of it. The front of the building had partially collapsed, and the windows were completely shattered. But the main structure was still standing. which meant the food inside might still be there. Marcus checked the street one last time. Quick in, quick out. We stepped through the broken entrance. Inside, the store was dark and silent. Shelves had been knocked over during the chaos of the first days, and the floor was covered in broken glass and scattered food packages. But not everything had been taken. Marcus grabbed a backpack from behind the counter and began filling it quickly with canned food. I found bottled water still stacked in the back. For a moment it almost felt like things might actually work. Maybe we'd get lucky. Maybe we'd make it back to the garage without being seen. Then the humming sound above the building suddenly grew louder. Much louder. Marcus looked up slowly. That's not good. A bright blue light suddenly flooded through the broken roof. A shadow passed over the store. A smaller alien craft was descending directly above us. And this time, it had definitely found something. Day 12. The blue light burned my eyes. I dropped the water bottle and ducked instinctively behind a toppled shelf. Marcus slammed the backpack shut and shoved it over his shoulder. Move, he hissed, grabbing my arm. I followed him toward the back of the store, weaving through the ruined aisles as the hovering craft above us circled lazily, its light sweeping the floor like a predator's gaze. Every movement felt amplified, every breath too loud. I could hear the faint whir of the alien engines and the unmistakable hum of their scanning beams. We reached the storage room at the back, its door hanging from one hinge. Marcus pushed it open and we slipped inside, pressing ourselves against the dusty crates. The light from outside vanished, replaced by a low, vibrating hum that seemed to shake the very walls. Marcus pressed his back to mine, breathing hard. They're not leaving, he muttered. They're searching. They know something's down here. I swallowed, trying not to panic. They can't know we're hiding, I whispered. We're just a couple of humans. Humans, he said bitterly, his voice tight. Just like everyone else, dead. The light returned, brighter this time. A beam scanned across the room, and I felt it pass mere inches above my head. I froze, counting every second as the alien ship slowly rotated, scanning every corner, every shadow. Then a sound I hadn't heard before, a sharp, clicking voice. The aliens communicate, not with words, but with these mechanical clicks, almost like Morse code. One of the patrols outside must have signaled the ship. Marcus clenched his fists. We need to move, now. I nodded, but my heart felt like it was lodged in my throat. We had no weapons, no escape route, and the streets outside were crawling with alien patrols. Follow me, Marcus whispered. He peered through a crack in the wall and motioned toward a narrow maintenance corridor that ran behind the store. It might lead to the alley. Quick, quiet. We slipped through the doorway, careful to avoid the debris. The corridor was dark, the air thick with dust and smoke. I stumbled over a fallen pipe and cursed under my breath. Marcus grabbed my arm, pulling me back into the shadows. Above, the hum of the ship grew louder, almost deafening. I could hear the soft thuds of alien boots from outside, patrolling, hunting, searching. Each sound made my stomach twist. We reached the end of the corridor. A broken wall led to the alley behind the supermarket. Marcus pressed himself against the bricks, peering into the open street. It's clear, for now, he whispered. I exhaled, relief flooding me for a brief moment. But the sense of safety was fragile. I knew the aliens weren't done. They never were. The city was still theirs, and we were still prey. And out there, somewhere above the smoke-filled sky, the alien ship waited. If you want, I can write Day 13 next, where Marcus and you attempt to make it back to the garage with the supplies, and maybe get a real close encounter with a new alien type. That one can get really intense. Day 13 to 30. The city had changed, not just physically, but in the way the air felt, heavy, tense, and always on edge. Every morning, the sun struggled to pierce the thick gray clouds of smoke, and every night, the alien patrols moved like silent predators across the rooftops. Marcus and I had made it back to the garage after the supermarket raid, bruised and rattled but alive. That small victory felt enormous at the time, a reminder that survival wasn't impossible. We barricaded the garage more securely, piling broken furniture and metal sheets against the entrances. We even dug shallow traps around the perimeter, crude but potentially life-saving. Days blurred together. We rationed the canned food carefully, drinking water sparingly, and scavenged every abandoned building we dared to enter. The alien patrols became predictable to an extent. They moved in sweeping patterns, their glowing blue eyes cutting through darkness and debris. We learned to read their rhythms, slipping past unnoticed when their attention shifted elsewhere. One day, about a week after the supermarket run, we found a small apartment building partially intact. Its residents were long gone, but inside, we discovered a stash of medical supplies, bandages, antibiotics, and even some painkillers. Marcus grinned for the first time in days. This could keep us going for weeks, he said. But the aliens were relentless. Every night, we could hear their hovering ships, the low hum vibrating through the walls of the garage. Sometimes, small scout drones would slip into the streets, scanning for heat signatures or movement. On one tense night, a drone passed so close that its scanning light nearly touched our barricade. We stayed frozen until it drifted away. By day 20, we were learning more about their technology. Small fragments of alien machinery, left behind after patrols or destroyed drones, hinted at how advanced they were. Marcus examined them with a mixture of curiosity and dread. They're not just strong, they're organized, he muttered. And they adapt. We discovered other survivors too, brief glimpses in ruined alleys or shadowed windows. Most were too frightened to trust anyone, and some had already fallen to patrols. We avoided contact for safety, but the knowledge that we weren't entirely alone offered a strange comfort. Food became scarce, and scavenging runs grew riskier. We learned to move only at twilight, using the shifting shadows to hide from alien patrols. The city felt alive in a terrifying way, empty streets filled with distant hums, the occasional alien screech, and the ever-present glow of their eyes scanning the ruins. By the end of this stretch, we had settled into a fragile routine: scavenge, hide, repair, repeat. Each day was a test, each night a gamble. And through it all, one truth remained undeniable: we were surviving in a world that no longer belonged to humans. Yet somehow, despite the constant threat, I felt a stubborn spark of hope. If we could survive 30 days in this hell, maybe we could last longer. Maybe we could see the sun again, unfiltered by smoke, untouched by alien war. Day 31 to 60. By day 31, survival had become a rhythm, dangerous, exhausting, but familiar. The city no longer looked like home. Entire neighborhoods had crumbled, and the streets were a twisted maze of wrecked cars, collapsed buildings, and smoke-choked alleys. But we had learned to move through it with purpose. Marcus and I decided it was time to expand our territory. The garage was safe enough for now, but supplies were running thin. We needed a plan to survive the long haul, and that meant exploring beyond familiar streets. Our first mission took us toward the downtown district, where skyscrapers loomed like jagged teeth against the gray sky. Alien patrols were more frequent here, and the drones were faster, more precise. One patrol, with armored soldiers twice the size of humans, forced us to retreat into a collapsed subway tunnel. We stayed hidden for hours, listening to the low hum of their engines above. It was terrifying, but we survived. During these weeks, we discovered small pockets of abandoned shelters. One building had a hidden rooftop garden, surprisingly untouched. Marcus and I salvaged the few edible plants we could find, supplementing our dwindling rations. For the first time, I tasted something green in over a month. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. The aliens were evolving too. We noticed subtle changes. Some patrols moved faster, their scanning patterns more erratic, and new alien types appeared. One night, we came across a smaller, spider-like scout that could climb walls and squeeze through debris. Its multiple glowing eyes tracked us relentlessly until Marcus threw a piece of metal to distract it. The creature skittered away, and we barely escaped. By day 45, we had a tentative routine. Scavenge during twilight, hide during patrol sweeps, and fortify the garage during daylight. Each night, we shared stories of the world before the invasion, memories that felt distant, almost like a dream. They kept us human, kept us sane. Around day 50, we discovered the first other survivors who weren't afraid to talk. A small group had fortified a library several blocks from our garage. They had food, makeshift weapons, and, most importantly, knowledge. Maps of the city, notes on patrol patterns, and diagrams of alien tech. We traded information cautiously. Strangers could be as dangerous as aliens, but it felt like a lifeline. By day 60, we had learned to exploit alien habits. Patrols avoided certain zones after heavy damage, drones rarely lingered in narrow alleys, and some of their communication signals could be masked by loud noises. Using these tactics, we managed to retrieve caches of supplies that had been overlooked: canned food, medical kits, even a few battery-powered lights. The city was still theirs, but for the first time in nearly 2 months, we felt a flicker of control. Survival was no longer just about hiding. It was about strategy, observation, and patience. We weren't winning, not yet. But for the first time, I felt like the aliens weren't invincible. And for people like Marcus and me, that tiny spark of hope was enough to keep going. Day 61 to 90. By day 61, the city had become a battlefield in miniature. Fires still smoldered in ruins, smoke choked the streets, and alien patrols moved with a terrifying precision. The longer we survived, the more we realized the aliens weren't just hunting. They were reorganizing, adapting. Marcus and I had grown bolder. We no longer stayed strictly in the shadows. We scouted during twilight, moving across rooftops and alleys, mapping patrol routes. It was risky, but necessary. We had discovered a few abandoned vehicles and learned to use them as cover when the patrols passed. Then came the new threat: a massive alien sentry. Towering over the regular patrols, this creature was unlike any we had seen. Its armored exoskeleton gleamed faintly under the gray sky, and its glowing red eyes scanned the ruins with an intelligence that sent shivers down my spine. Unlike the smaller patrols, it didn't move in predictable patterns. It hunted deliberately, and its roar-like clicks echoed through the city, making every shadow seem alive. One night, we were crossing a partially collapsed bridge when it appeared. Marcus froze, his hand gripping my arm. The sentry's glowing eyes scanned the debris. Its limbs moved with frightening speed, and even from a distance, I could feel the ground vibrate beneath its weight. We pressed ourselves against the rusted beams, holding our breath until it passed. That night, sleep felt impossible. During these weeks, we also experimented with traps. Using debris, wires, and salvaged explosives from abandoned buildings, we built rudimentary alarms and tripwires around our garage. It wasn't much, but it gave us a fighting chance if patrols or scouts got too close. Supplies remained scarce. Food ran low, and even water was rationed carefully. We scavenged ruins, risking every patrol sweep to find canned goods, medicine, or batteries. Each successful raid was a victory, but every trip outside carried the constant threat of death. By day 75, we had discovered another group of survivors, holed up in the basement of a fire station. They were wary but skilled, and we joined forces cautiously. Together, we shared knowledge about alien routines, traps, and weak points in their technology. Their presence was a relief. There was safety in numbers, even if the city was still overwhelmingly hostile. Day 90 arrived with a rare moment of victory. Using our combined knowledge, we managed to ambush a small alien patrol. It wasn't easy. 2 of the survivors were injured, but we recovered supplies from the defeated aliens, including a strange device that Marcus was eager to study. The city was still theirs, the aliens still deadly. But for the first time, we felt like humans could fight back. Each day was still a test, each night still a gamble. But now, we weren't just surviving. We were learning, adapting, and the thought that we might survive this nightmare, that hope, small as it was, kept us moving forward. Day 91 to 120. By day 91, the garage was no longer enough. With supplies running low and alien patrols growing more aggressive, Marcus, I, and the other survivors decided to fortify a larger safe zone, the old city library. Its thick concrete walls, multiple floors, and narrow corridors made it ideal for defense. The first week was grueling. We carried debris and furniture to barricade entrances, reinforced windows with metal sheets, and set up alarms and traps around the perimeter. Each day, alien patrols hovered closer, their scanning lights sweeping the ruined streets. But we learned to move silently, communicate in whispers, and use the shadows to our advantage. By day 100, the library felt like a true fortress. We even set up a makeshift garden on the roof, growing some plants salvaged from ruined apartment buildings. The green life was a small but powerful reminder of what we were fighting for. For a moment, hope seemed tangible. But the aliens adapted. Around day 105, small scout drones began infiltrating the streets near the library at night. Their mechanical clicks were sharper, their movements faster. One night, a drone slipped through a cracked window and hovered directly above our barricade. Marcus barely threw a pile of books in time to disrupt its sensors. It took hours before it finally left, leaving a tense silence in its wake. Then came the retaliation. Day 112 brought the low hum of massive alien engines overhead, the first time we saw a larger, winged carrier descend above the city. Its shadow darkened the streets, and the ground vibrated beneath its weight. Patrols intensified, sweeping through our safe zones with terrifying coordination. One night, the city erupted. Explosions ripped through nearby blocks as alien weapons reduced abandoned buildings to rubble. The survivors inside the library huddled together, barricading doors and praying we weren't next. We could hear the metallic footsteps of patrols outside, the clicks of communication, and the occasional piercing blue beam slicing the darkness. We fought strategically, using traps, improvised weapons, and the chaos of the crumbling city. We managed to delay the patrols and escape detection. But not without cost. 2 of our group were injured, and supplies were heavily depleted. Every victory felt temporary, every breath a reminder of the constant danger. By day 120, fatigue had set in. Sleep was brief and fitful, and the constant vigilance weighed on every survivor. Yet, in the quiet moments, Marcus and I reflected on how far we had come. From terrified scavengers hiding in the shadows, we had become fighters, cunning, resourceful, and resilient. The aliens were still in control of the city, but for the first time, we felt the faint stirrings of defiance. Survival was no longer just about hiding. It was about reclaiming what little of our world remained, and maybe, just maybe, turning the tables on our invaders. Day 121 to 150. By day 121, the library had become more than a shelter. It was a home, a base, a fragile symbol of resistance. But the illusion of safety was short-lived. The aliens were learning, adapting, and their attacks grew more sophisticated with each passing week. One morning, Marcus and I climbed to the roof to survey the city. Smoke still rose from ruins across the skyline, and patrols moved methodically through the streets. Then we saw it. A strange, metallic object hovering silently above a collapsed hospital. Its shape was unfamiliar, sleek, almost organic, with tendrils that extended and retracted like fingers. Whatever it wasn't part of the standard patrols. That night, the object came closer. It unleashed a pulse of energy that shattered windows across several blocks, forcing us to dive for cover. The survivors huddled together in the basement, whispers of fear echoing off the concrete walls. Marcus's jaw was tight. "They're escalating," he muttered. "They want to break us." Scavenging runs became even more dangerous. Supplies were dwindling faster than expected, and we were forced to venture further into alien-controlled territory. On one raid, we stumbled upon a partially destroyed alien drone. Marcus examined it carefully, discovering components that could potentially be repurposed. We realized that understanding their technology might be the only way to fight back. But the losses came quickly. Day 135 brought the first real tragedy. A patrol had discovered one of our secondary hideouts, a small stash of supplies we had stored across the street. The resulting attack left the area in flames and one of our group, a young man named Elias, dead. The rest of us barely escaped through the alleyways, shaken and grieving. Survival had never felt so bitter. By day 140, the group had adapted again, moving in smaller teams and using decoys to distract patrols. We set up more traps, rigging abandoned cars and debris to make noise in precise patterns, giving us precious seconds to slip away. Despite the danger, we discovered pockets of hope, abandoned apartments with food, medical supplies, and even functional generators. Marcus and I spent hours analyzing alien patrols, noting patterns, predicting movements. We began to plan a long-term strategy: observe, adapt, and strike only when the odds were in our favor. It wasn't a full offensive, not yet, but it was the first step toward reclaiming some control. By day 150, survival had become both art and science. Each decision, each movement, carried weight. Every patrol we evaded, every supply cache we recovered, strengthened our fragile sense of defiance. The aliens controlled the city, but we were learning their rules, exploiting their weaknesses, and holding on to the most human thing of all: hope. We were battered, weary, and exhausted. But for the first time, I realized that survival wasn't enough anymore. We wanted to fight back. Day 151 to 180. By day 151, the library had become a fortress. Barricades lined every entrance, traps were set along the streets, and the survivors had learned to move silently, communicating only in whispers. But the aliens were relentless. They adapted faster than we ever expected, sending larger patrols and deploying a new breed of combat units, taller, faster, with exoskeletons that seemed almost impervious. One morning, a low hum vibrated through the city, louder than anything we had heard before. Marcus and I climbed to the rooftop, peering through the smog. Hundreds of patrols were converging from multiple directions, led by the winged carriers we had glimpsed before. Their glowing eyes scanned the streets with deadly precision. It was the first time the aliens launched a coordinated attack specifically aimed at a human stronghold. The library shook as energy beams cut through nearby buildings, fires spreading like wildfire. The survivors inside scrambled to reinforce barricades, weapons in hand. We fought strategically, using traps and debris to slow the patrols. Molotov cocktails and improvised explosives became our lifeline. One of the alien soldiers fell after Marcus aimed a makeshift harpoon at a weak joint in its exoskeleton. I couldn't believe it. We had actually injured one. The others paused, almost hesitant, before continuing their sweep. During the chaos, I noticed something unusual. The larger aliens hesitated near certain damaged areas, avoiding broken walls and collapsed metal. Marcus pointed it out. They're careful around instability. Maybe it's a weak spot, he whispered. The realization hit us like a spark. Even these creatures weren't invincible. Over the next week, we adapted our tactics. We funneled patrols into narrow streets, set traps in predictable zones, and observed their reactions. Each engagement gave us more information, and slowly, we started exploiting their behavior. By day 170, morale among the survivors improved. The library held. We had turned the tides in small skirmishes, forcing patrols to retreat more often. Supplies remained scarce, but the victories, no matter how minor, gave everyone a renewed sense of purpose. However, the cost was high. Injuries, fatigue, and the constant threat of alien retaliation weighed heavily. On day 180, a massive patrol unexpectedly bypassed our defenses, catching 2 survivors in an alley. Marcus and I arrived too late to save them, and their deaths reminded us that the city was still their world, and we were intruders in it. Yet something had changed. For the first time, we had evidence. The aliens had weaknesses. The hesitation near unstable structures, the jointed exoskeletons, and their reliance on patrol patterns, all of it was knowledge we could use. Survival was no longer just a struggle. It was preparation. Preparation for the next phase. A fight not just to endure, but to resist. The city was dark, broken, and deadly. But for the first time in months, hope felt real. Day 181 to 210. By day 181, the city had grown colder. Smoke mingled with frost, and the ruined streets were coated in ice, making every step treacherous. Supplies were scarcer than ever. The garden on the library roof was dying, and even scavenging runs became a gamble with each patrol more alert than the last. Winter brought more than cold, it brought tension. The survivors were weary. Arguments flared over rationing, hiding, and the constant fear of alien attacks. Nights were long and filled with nightmares. I saw Marcus staring at the ceiling for hours, silent, jaw tight, as if calculating survival itself. We all felt it. The psychological weight of over 6 months in a city that was no longer ours. But necessity breeds courage. By day 190, we decided it was time to take bigger risks. Scouting missions now ventured deeper into alien-controlled districts, sometimes 3 or 4 blocks past our usual limits. We moved during twilight, using shadows and debris as cover, watching patrol patterns closely. Each successful run meant more food, medicine, or information, and every failure could mean death. One night, we stumbled upon an abandoned electronics store. Inside, we found batteries, wires, and a half-functioning generator. Marcus's eyes lit up. If we can rig this, we can make noise traps, maybe even lure patrols into traps we set, he whispered. It felt like a breakthrough, a way to fight back, even in small ways. The alien patrols were evolving too. New creatures, taller than before with reinforced armor, now moved in coordinated pairs, signaling each other with sharp clicks that cut through the winter air. They were relentless, more precise, and their scanning lights seemed almost intelligent. We narrowly escaped one patrol when Marcus triggered a decoy we had set up, sending them down a collapsed alley while we slipped through the shadows. By day 200, morale improved slightly. Small victories, a scavenged cache of canned goods, a disabled patrol, or a successful escape, reminded us we weren't powerless. But the strain of nearly 7 months of constant danger was evident. Survivors huddled close, sharing warmth and whispered memories of life before the invasion. By day 210, Marcus and I realized something important. Survival wasn't enough anymore. We couldn't just hide and scavenge. To last another 100 days, we had to learn more about our enemies. Every patrol observed, every weak point noted, and every risk carefully calculated. The city remained theirs, cold and merciless. But winter had made us sharper, more cunning. Fear was still constant, but hope, stubborn and flickering, had returned. And in that hope, we found the strength to keep moving forward. Day 211 to 240. By day 211, survival alone no longer felt sufficient. The library was secure, the garden on the roof struggling but still alive, and morale holding, yet the city was still dominated by alien forces. Marcus and I realized that to last another 100 days, we needed to understand them, their routines, their technology, and their weaknesses. We began taking calculated risks. Twilight runs extended farther than ever, allowing us to study patrol patterns and drone behaviors. We noted that drones avoided certain debris-littered streets, patrols hesitated near unstable buildings, and the larger winged carriers followed predictable circuits unless alerted. Knowledge became our weapon. Around day 220, we discovered our first crashed alien scout ship in the outskirts of a destroyed mall. Its hull was torn and smoking, partially embedded in a pile of rubble. Inside, we found fragments of alien machinery, strange tools, and glowing containers that pulsed faintly. Marcus spent hours examining them, carefully salvaging what could be useful. It wasn't much. A few wiring units, mechanical joints, and a small energy cell, but it gave us hope. We realized that even their technology could be exploited if we understood it. Marcus grinned for the first time in weeks. If we can reverse engineer even a fraction of this, we might be able to fight back, he whispered. Scavenging became our new focus. We set up small teams, creating decoys and lures to distract patrols. One of our more daring missions recovered medical supplies and extra food from a collapsed hospital. Another brought back a functioning generator, allowing us to power some improvised alarms around the library. But alien retaliation was constant. Around day 230, patrols became more frequent and aggressive. Small flying units hovered near the library, their red eyes scanning relentlessly. One night, a patrol discovered a minor tripwire trap we had set in an alley. Its loud clicking alerted others, forcing Marcus and me to dive into the shadows while the patrol swept past. By day 240, we had become cunning survivors and reluctant strategists. We mapped alien patterns, exploited weak points in their exoskeletons, and learned to coordinate attacks, small but effective, to reclaim supplies. The survivors adapted too, becoming quieter, sharper, and more disciplined. The city was still theirs, cold and merciless. But knowledge, for the first time, gave us a glimmer of advantage. Survival was no longer just about hiding. It was about learning, planning, and striking when the odds were in our favor. And somewhere in the ruined skyline, the aliens were beginning to notice that humans were no longer easy prey. By day 241, the library had become more than a shelter, it was a command center for survival. Barricades were reinforced, traps set along every alley, and survivors moved with precision. But the aliens were no longer just patrolling. They were hunting. It began with low hums in the distance, distant flashes of blue energy cutting through ruined streets. Patrols grew larger, coordinated, and faster. Then, one twilight, we saw it. Dozens of armored soldiers moving in sweeping formations toward the library, led by one of the massive winged carriers. The air seemed to vibrate with their presence, and the city felt alive with danger. Marcus and I moved quickly, rallying the survivors. We activated improvised alarms, set decoy traps along side streets, and positioned sharpshooters on the rooftop. Our plan wasn't to defeat them outright, it was to survive the onslaught and turn the city's chaos to our advantage. The battle erupted at dusk. Energy beams lanced through the streets, setting abandoned cars and rubble ablaze. The smaller patrols advanced cautiously, wary of our traps, while the winged carrier circled overhead. Explosions rocked the library as some of our improvised defenses triggered successfully, knocking several patrols off balance. We fought strategically, targeting weak joints in the armored exoskeletons. One soldier fell after Marcus hit a critical point with a makeshift spear. Others hesitated, giving our team precious seconds to escape through prepared corridors. The chaos allowed us to reclaim a small cache of supplies from a nearby ruin, food, water, and even a functioning medical kit. But victory came at a cost. Several survivors were injured, one lost entirely when a patrol breached a secondary barricade, and the library itself bore scars, shattered windows, scorched walls, and deep gouges in the concrete. By day 260, it was clear the aliens were adapting to our tactics. They now avoided obvious traps, coordinated more efficiently, and their scanning patterns had become unpredictable. Despite the losses, we learned something invaluable. The aliens had patterns, and those patterns could be exploited. Even the massive winged carriers avoided certain structural weaknesses and preferred open streets. Marcus and I began planning long-range missions, using this knowledge to reclaim supplies and strike at patrols strategically rather than blindly. By day 270, fatigue weighed heavily on everyone. The city was colder, darker, and deadlier than ever. But something had changed in the survivors. Fear remained, but it was tempered with knowledge, experience, and a growing defiance. We were no longer just surviving. We were adapting, learning, and preparing for a future where we might not just live, we might fight back. The city still belonged to the aliens, but for the first time in months, we believed it could belong to humans again. By day 271, the city had grown harsher than ever. Winter had receded slightly, leaving the streets muddy and slippery. Fires smoldered in distant blocks, and the stench of decay hung in the air. The library still stood, battered but unbroken, our fortress and our lifeline. Marcus and I realized that survival alone wouldn't be enough. We had to strike strategically, reclaiming supplies, territory, and knowledge from the aliens. Small skirmishes were no longer sufficient. We needed coordinated, large-scale operations. We began mapping patrol patterns meticulously, observing how drones moved through alleys, how winged carriers circled the skyline, and how the massive soldiers reacted to obstacles. Each observation revealed a weakness: joints in exoskeletons, avoidance of unstable structures, and predictable patrol circuits during certain hours. Around day 280, we discovered another crashed alien vessel, this one larger than the scout ship we had found earlier. Its hull was partially embedded in a collapsed office building. Inside, Marcus found an energy cell still pulsing faintly and fragments of alien tech that could be adapted into weapons or traps. The survivors began scavenging in teams, carefully retrieving supplies and experimental tools. By day 290, the group had become a well-oiled unit. Patrols were lured into traps, decoys distracted drones, and improvised explosive devices slowed down larger forces. The survivors' morale was higher than ever, not because the city was safe, but because we were learning to fight back. The first major tactical strike came on day 295. Marcus led a team to lure a patrol into a narrow alley rigged with our improvised explosives. The plan worked perfectly. Several soldiers were disabled, and a winged carrier avoided the area entirely, showing us that even their advanced units could be manipulated. We recovered alien tech and supplies from the ambushed patrol, a reward that felt like a turning point. By day 300, the library was more than a safe zone. It was a command center. Plans were drawn for even larger operations, using knowledge, traps, and cunning to turn the city's chaos to our advantage. Every survivor had a role, and we moved with precision born of months of experience. The aliens still dominated the city, but for the first time, humans were not just surviving. We were learning to strike back, exploiting weaknesses, and preparing for a future where the tide could begin to turn. Hope, long buried under smoke and fear, was growing stronger. By day 301, the survivors had grown confident, perhaps too confident. Months of hiding, observing, and learning had taught us the aliens' patterns. Now, Marcus and I believed it was time to act decisively. We planned a large-scale coordinated strike to reclaim a district just blocks from the library. Using traps, decoys, and precise timing, we aimed to disable patrols, gather supplies, and weaken the aliens, hold on the city. Every survivor had a role: lookouts, scouts, trap setters, and medics. The operation began at dusk on day 305. Shadows stretched across ruined streets as we moved silently, guiding patrols into pre-set traps. Explosives detonated at the perfect moment, sending armored soldiers sprawling. One of the winged carriers swooped low, but Marcus had anticipated its flight path, and we managed to divert it using debris and light signals. It was our most successful mission yet. By day 310, the reclaimed district provided shelter, additional supplies, and even some abandoned vehicles. The survivors fortified the area, turning a small cluster of buildings into a secondary safe zone. Morale soared. For the first time, the city didn't feel entirely hopeless. But the cost of bold action was high. Alien retaliation was swift and brutal. Patrols grew larger, drones more aggressive, and a massive strike force attacked the district near dawn on day 320. Fires consumed several buildings, and several survivors were injured or lost. The scale of the aliens' power was undeniable. They were still the dominant force. Yet, we had learned something crucial: the aliens were not infallible. Their larger units avoided structural hazards, their scanning patterns could be manipulated, and their communication signals, while advanced, were not completely secure. Marcus and I began analyzing their tech, attempting to reverse engineer tools that could give humans a real edge. By day 330, the survivors were exhausted but determined. We had gained ground, learned from losses, and proven that humans could fight back effectively. The city was still theirs, but the balance was shifting, slowly, precariously, but undeniably. Hope had become a weapon as potent as any spear, any trap, any improvised explosive. And for the first time in almost a year, we could imagine a future where humans were not merely prey, but players in this battle for survival. By day 331, the survivors were battle-hardened. Months of hiding, observing, and fighting had transformed fear into determination. The library was reinforced like a fortress, the secondary safe zone held strong, and every survivor had a role. We were no longer running blindly, we were striking with precision. Patrols had grown cautious. The aliens sensed resistance, and their usual confidence wavered. Marcus and I noticed patterns. Even the winged carriers avoided damaged streets, drones hesitated at traps, and armored soldiers reacted predictably when confronted. We planned one final campaign, not just to survive, but to reclaim what we could of the city. The operation began on day 340. Teams moved in coordinated strikes, luring patrols into traps, disabling drones, and sabotaging the alien infrastructure. For the first time, humans had the upper hand, using the knowledge we had gathered over nearly a year. Explosives toppled drones, improvised weapons pierced exoskeletons, and communication signals from downed aliens gave us crucial insight. By day 350, the city block by block began to feel human again. Fires were controlled, abandoned vehicles cleared, and makeshift barricades restored. Survivors moved freely in areas that had been death traps for months. The aliens were still dangerous, but their dominance was slipping. On day 360, the final confrontation came. A massive alien strike force, led by a winged carrier, descended near our main safe zone. We had prepared meticulously. Traps were set, decoys in place, and every weak point observed. The battle raged for hours. Energy beams lit up the night sky, and the air vibrated with the roar of alien engines. Marcus and I targeted the winged carrier, exploiting its avoidance of unstable structures. A well-timed trap collapsed part of a ruined building onto its landing zone, disabling it temporarily. Survivors coordinated attacks, taking out patrols and drones systematically. The tide of battle shifted. By day 365, the city was quiet. Smoke still rose from distant fires, but alien patrols were scattered, weakened, and retreating. Humans had survived the year. We had lost some, gained scars, but we had endured, learned, and fought back. For the first time, the city felt like it could belong to us again. Marcus looked at the skyline, now streaked with dawn light. "We made it," he said quietly. I nodded, exhausted but alive. The year of horror, fear, and relentless struggle had forged us into survivors. The aliens had been powerful, but we had been clever, adaptable, and unyielding. Survival had become resistance, and resistance had become hope. For the first time in 365 days, we could imagine a future, not just of surviving, but of reclaiming the world that had been stolen from us. And in that moment, the sun rose again, piercing the gray smoke with a golden light, promising that humans were not finished yet. The city was quiet now, almost hauntingly so. Smoke still curled from ruined streets, and shattered buildings lined the skyline like jagged teeth. But for the first time in a year, humans walked freely, cautiously, but unafraid. Marcus and I stood on the library rooftop, watching the sunrise paint the city in gold and orange hues. We had survived 365 days of invasion, fear, and relentless alien attacks. We had learned, adapted, and fought back. "It's not over," Marcus said, eyes scanning the horizon. "But we've proven we can fight. We can survive. We can reclaim this world." I nodded. The journey had been brutal, but hope was alive. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of turning survival into victory. If you've followed our story from day 1 to 365, you know it hasn't been easy. Every choice, every escape, every fight mattered, and it shows that even in the darkest moments, humans have the strength to endure. So if you enjoyed surviving the alien invasion with us, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more epic survival stories, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a chapter. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which day or moment shocked you the most? And stay tuned, because our journey isn't over. The world may be ours to reclaim, but survival is always just the beginning.